I was also a big Star Trek fan when I was a kid. I was a huge fan, an enormous fan. I was one of the people in the United States who wrote letters to NBC when the show was canceled. I was the first program that I saw when we bought a color television. It was a Magnavox tube color television, and I waited all that. It was delivered on a Thursday. I refused to watch anything, and I waited till the show, till Star Trek came on. I wanted to see it first in color. It was on after Flipper. But I remember sitting there, looking at the color of their jerseys, their tops, and everything. But we used to talk about the show all the time. It was always about something. What was this about? What was this show about? And the conception behind the show of having the captain standing behind someone who was pure heart, Bones, and somebody who was pure mind, Spock. It was this amazing thing as a kid, and you watched it, and it was something that I got to talk to my best friend at the time, Mike Brown. His name I remember. I haven't seen him in 40 years now, but he was my best friend at that time, and we would call each other as soon as the show was over. And this is the way, and then when you went to school the following Monday, you talked to everybody about what Star Trek was about. In my life, I never imagined, ever, that I would be on Star Trek. I mean, it was just one of those things when you're a kid, you want certain things in life, but that's a fantasy. Well, in 1988, I had the good fortune of working on a film called The Long Walk Home with Whoopi Goldberg and Sissy Spacek. Now, I had known Brent Spiner from New York, and I knew Jonathan Frakes. He had worked on a television miniseries with my wife called North and South. And so when I was making this movie with Whoopi Goldberg, and I met her, the very first thing I did was tell her what a big fan I was of the show. And how I knew Brent, and how I knew Jonathan, and how I talked to Brent, and Brent was worried about being on Star Trek and being compared to the original, and what was going to happen, and maybe it was a mistake, and I shouldn't be doing this. And anyway, it's not even on a network; it's going to be syndicated. And you go through all of this, and I told Brent it was going to be a big success, and he shouldn't worry about being compared to the original. And I told Whoopi what a big fan I was, and how successful I thought the show was going to be. And she said, "You ought to be on that show. You ought to be on the show." And I said, "Oh, come on." Well, after we finished shooting, I was back in Los Angeles, and I got a call from my manager. And my manager said that she's passed on now. But she said to me, "Dwight?" I said, "Yes, Lynn. I have a surprise for you." I said, "Yes, Lynn." And I have to tell you, I mean, I've never known what I was going to do. I've never had 2 jobs in a row. I've never finished a job knowing what my next job was, ever in my life. So, I mean, it's always been a struggle. And so I said, "Okay, Lynn, what is the surprise? What is the surprise?" She said, "I have a script for you." And I said, okay. And she said, "You don't have to audition for it." And I said, "Will you tell me what it is?" She said, "It's Star Trek." I have to tell you, in my mind, and this is, so help me, this is true, in my mind's eye, I was going to wear the best Michael Westmore makeup that has ever been. Large head, pulsating veins, eyes that moved, fingers that could reach and get under your shoes and untie it. Whatever. It's just one of these amazing things in my head. I'm picturing, what is it going to be? What am I going to do? How am I going to look? So the script arrives. I open the pages. A nerd. Yes. It's me.
for you.
So it was obviously not what I had in mind, right? However, by the time I finished reading that script, I realized how brilliant they were continuously on Star Trek. They finally decided to put a fan on the deck of the Enterprise. Someone, a normal human being, who was brilliant, who could do the things that had to be done, but he was a normal human being that normal human beings could identify with. He was not a superhero. He was somebody who was fallible, who had to deal with fallible difficulties that he had. That he had there were uncertainties. He couldn't be right all the time, and he knew it, and he had to struggle with it. It was an incredible idea on their part, and it was perfect for me. In fact, when people always ask me, who are you more like? I'm too well known for two characters, Murdoch on the A-Team, and people always ask, well, who are you more like? And I have to answer the question by saying that Murdoch is the person I always wanted to be, and Barclay is closer to what I am. Yes, a nerd. I mean, kind of nerdy. I mean, this is the truth. This is the truth. When I was 16 years old, now a lot of you in this room are too young to remember this sort of. I'm a big hi-fi buff. High fidelity stereo systems, where you actually sit down and for hours listen to music. When I was 16 years old, when other people were going to dances, I was hanging around three-way 18-inch drivers on North Avenue in Baltimore. These loudspeakers that would hang on the wall, or actually they were in the wall. JBL, Electro Voice. These speakers there were three speakers in one, and I would go to the store, and they all knew who I was. I never bought anything, because I didn't have the money to buy. I just hung around looking at these loudspeakers. And eventually I was able to put together, when I got my first job washing dishes at Thompson's Seacurt restaurant in Baltimore, I was able to go out and buy the loudspeaker that I had been hanging around for, well, we didn't have computers. You built amplifiers through heat kits. So I built my own amplifiers through a heat kit, and I put together my own loudspeakers. So I was a nerd. I was an original nerd. See that? There's no signal. Not there at all. Man, that's right. Sorry. Is it an Optima? What is it? Projector? No, I know it's a projector. I'm an engineer, for help. At least I played one and stayed at the Holiday Inn last night. Is that an Optima? What is that? Panasonic. Is it an LCD? Or DLP? See, I'm still a nerd. Yes, I am. Right? So I really identified with the character. And actors are, I in particular, we're sort of, we don't want to admit it, but we are, we're kind of vampires. All of my characters are based on people that I've known or that I've seen. I do dialects, but the dialects aren't, there are some people who do a Yorkshire dialect or a London dialect or a North Country dialect, and they can do the dialect and then they know it by region. I do dialects based on people. If I know somebody, if I hear somebody, and I will imitate their voice, steal it from them, and then I do that. But I don't necessarily know where that's from. It's pure imitation. And I have always figured as an actor that why should I go to the trouble to try to make up people when there are all these living, breathing human beings that are walking around me that are so perfect? And you know somebody for almost everything. You've all met someone who you couldn't stand. You've all met someone who you thought was evil. You've all met people that you thought was wonderful who turned out to be evil. You all know people who are anal retentive, people who don't care about their physical condition. You know people who are particularly neat. You all know somebody who fits almost any description. And so when I read this script of this nerd, the extraordinary thing was because the stammer, the Barclay stammer was written in, ... He couldn't complete his thoughts. And I knew this person. I'm reading it and I'm saying, I know this person. And indeed, I knew someone who worked for the New York Symphony Orchestra. We'll just call him John. That's what I call him whenever I tell this story. His name is John, but that is not his name. And this is the truth. I swear that this is the truth. John was a very fascinating fellow. Right after I got my first Broadway show in New York, actually I started off Broadway, it was a play called The Water Engine, and then it moved to Broadway. It was the longest, I mean it ran for like 5 months off Broadway, and it was the longest thing I'd ever been in my life. I started looking for my own apartment because I had been sharing an apartment with a fellow on 15th Street in New York. We had a tub in the kitchen, bathroom down the hall. Very cold in New York in winter. Very cold. So I really wanted my own apartment. So I found an apartment. I found a place, but I couldn't move into it. I told everybody that I was looking for a place. And in the process of telling everybody that I was looking for an apartment, John, who was going on tour with the symphony, they had various branches of the symphony to go out and play music for schools and things of this nature. Well, he was going to be gone from his apartment for like 4 months. So I came home one night, and in those days, we had tape in our entry machines. You had 2 tapes. You had a tape for outgoing message, and you had a tape for the incoming message. So I came home, and I had, indeed, 3, 4, 5 messages on my machine. So I hit the button, and this came. Dwight, this is John. I understand that you're looking for an apartment for a while, and I am subletting my apartment for about 4 months. It's lovely. Apartment. It has a bedroom and lovely. Hang up. Message 2. Dwight, this is I know you're looking for a place to stay for a while. I am going to be out of town, and my apartment is. Oh dear, I haven't heard the chime. Do I still talk? Third message. Dwight, this is John. I'm not sure my other message was clear. That's it. And it went on again. I saved those messages. Obviously. I mean, I saved them. I mean, an actor, I could not destroy those tapes. And I kept them. And I knew that someday that they would become, they would mean something to me. And they did. When I read Barclay. And I called John and I told him. Now, this is the thing that I haven't told you yet, that makes him more like Barclay and explains more of Barclay than, well, let me just tell you. John did not. The reason that this was such a shock to me when I heard the messages was that when you met John and you were face to face, there wasn't any stammering. He didn't stammer a lot. There was sometimes he would, it was slight, but I mean, it was not like these messages. And I said to him, I said, John, I said, you have to tell me, why were you stuttering like that on the message? And he had this very rational explanation. He said, oh, well, I couldn't see your reaction. You see, when I can't see your reaction, I don't know how you're reacting to me. And so I'm thinking about how you're reacting to me, even though I can't see you. But this was, it literally was he was worried about the way I would react to him offering his apartment as a sublet. And was I smiling? Did I say, I don't want that stinking apartment? Who the hell is he to leave this message? I mean, this is the kind of thing that was going on in his mind. He was, in his own mind, he could not say, well, I'm leaving a message and take it or leave it. He was worried about himself, about the way he looked, about the way he was coming across, and he couldn't judge how I was reacting, and therefore he became nervous. We're all different. And so I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, you mustn't do this yourself. You leave a message and then don't worry, you mustn't worry about this. But then, this was someone who played the trombone. People who play the trombone worry. Because his lips were getting flatter and flatter and bigger and bigger. John worried about everything. Trombone players are really interesting people. Because they truly are. But and he was a fascinating person. But at any rate, this is the person that I based Barclay on, and it was a pure joy to be able to walk in there to my first day of shooting, knowing really how I wanted to play this character. I didn't have to worry about it. I knew who he was. The problem is that when you shoot and you're a guest star, you come on to a TV series. I mean, it's a little difficult, more difficult than if you're a regular on a show, because you are indeed a guest. Everyone there knows each other. They're all familiar. I was lucky that I knew Sprint. And I knew Brent and Frank. I knew them. And I knew Whoopi, so that made things easy. But you're not a regular. You're not a regular. But my first day of shooting, unfortunately, was, and they always do this, and I don't know why they do this. But my first day of shooting, we shot the tag, which is the final scene in the show. In other words, everything has been done. This was Hollow Pursuits, where Barclay has all these fantasies on the holodeck, and he plays all these different characters. And we come in and we shoot the final scene. And so I went, and that was it. And I did it. And the director was a little nonplussed with the way I was doing it. And I didn't understand why. I was Barclay. I didn't understand. Well, the next day, when we came to shoot, the director said, I think you're playing Barclay a little too gay. And I said, oh, well, wait a minute. It was not gay. He wasn't gay. He just was, he was not a hero. He wasn't standing there talking like he was an ordinary person. He's an ordinary person. He's not, why was he gay? Well, he's just a little, I told him, it was the tag. It was the damn tag of the show. You have to have, this is an ordinary person who has fantasies. You see the people that he wants to be in the fantasies, so you have to have a great distinction. And the audience has to see before, after, and in between. I said, this is after. Well, this is a difficult thing. I've had this happen to me a lot in my life. Where people come and tell me, well, everything you're doing is wrong. But I've kind of been lucky, in that things turned out well. And then after the dailies were seen, the director came back and said, well, I guess they thought it was okay. And so, then when I started to work with the cast, and and it was truly a joy. Working on the Paramount lot on a show like Star Trek, where basically they want it to be as good as it possibly can be. It was very, very different than my experience on the A-Team. Well, it was. I mean, it was. Although, I mean, now the A-Team too, was also based on a character that well, I'll get to that. Working on the A-Team was very different because whereas on Star Trek there were 10 revisions from the time you got your first script. 10. They had different colors. And then sometimes they run out of colors and start color the same color second time. And they put some phony name on it. The first, when you get the first script, it's on white. When they go through all the colors that they have, then it goes through brilliant white. But this was it. They gave you changes that they believed made the show better. On the A-Team, we never got those changes. We demanded changes. and frequently, I mean, they would say, well, what's wrong with that? And you say, well, this particular character happens to be in 3 different places at the same time. No. Or you would say to one of the producers, did you know that we started show 222? Oh, did you start that already? No, I'm serious. Or they'd say, you know, we didn't have time to really finish the tag. Can you come up with something? Now, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. Working on the A-Team was also a great thrill because I was one of the regulars, and so I was able to help create the show and the character. I had a lot to say about what went on. You don't have that much to say when you go into a Star Trek set. It's there. You have to do it. But when you create a character on your own TV show, you have a lot to say. And as actors on that show, NBC hated it. They wanted it to fail. And in fact, when we were shooting the pilot, we were in Mexico. We shot the pilot in Mexico. All of the actors, the regular actors, except for George Peppard, were in a particular hunting wagon called the Truck, and it was 2 stories. So we shared this. The actors shared this hunting wagon, and I was on the bottom floor. Well, while I was in Mexico, the director came to me and said, Dwight, we're moving you to the stuntman trailers. And I said, well, was there a reason for that? And they said, yes, they don't think America is going to accept you. I'm afraid it's not working out. You're not going to make it, pal. And that's right. So I was, needless to say, moved to the stuntman trailer, and quite devastated by the fact that here I was in Mexico, knowing that I would go back to the States and have to, tell my wife and everyone else, and my manager, my agent, and all that I was being fired. Well, when the cast got wind of it, at the time, there was an actor by the name of Tim Dunnigan who was playing Faceman, not Dirk Benedict. And Tim Dunnigan and Melinda Kalea, who found out that I was on the outs, they came to me, they grabbed me, they hugged me, we went out for drinks. There was this great camaraderie. They were very sorry, and they were trying to bolster my ego. And it was a very hard time. But Tim in particular, Tim Dunnigan, he just put his arms around me and just said, pal, it's going to work. Don't worry, you'll get something else. It'll all work out. So we went back to the States, and as we were shooting the show, they were cutting it and putting it together. And then, of course, I did not know this. This was the first thing I had really ever done in television. I did one little part on a show called Andros Targets back in the 70s. Nobody wants to know about that. Oh, actually, I was on Chips, too. I did a little Chips. But you don't want to know about that either. But at at any rate, so we went back to the States, and they were testing the show. And the way they test the show is they put people in a small theater, and in front of every person is a dial, literally a dial. And they're told that if you like what's happening on the screen, you turn the dial as far as you would like to the right. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10. And if you don't like what's going on, you turn it all the way to the left, as far as you would like, all the way to 10. So I get this call from my agent, who now knows I'm been fired. And he calls me up breathlessly, saying, Dwight, I just got this call from Brandon Tartikoff. Your dials were great. What the hell is that? Dials? What are dials? I don't know what dials are. Your dials were great. People were turning the dials all the way to the right, even if they just heard your voice. They weren't even on the screen. They just heard your voice in the dial. So I wasn't fired. When we came back to shoot after the pilot was finished, when we came back to shoot the first episode, we came into a room and I found out that Tim Dunnigan was fired. There was Dirk. They didn't tell us that Dirk was going to be there. We came in and all of a sudden, everybody, this is Dirk Benedict. He will now be playing Faceman. And of course, this is a long story, but the irony and the difficulty that I had at this moment really something, because my memories, I was just flooded with the fact that here was Tim consoling me and giving me just everything that he could give me to make me feel better, and yet he is the one who's fired. And that's show business, and literally, that's the way show business is. It's a very, it is, as I said to my friend, it's the only business in the world in which it takes you 3 years to realize you've been fired. You know, I haven't worked in how many years? 4 years now. I think I was fired. Yes. And it's true. You don't know. You don't know. But the whole industry has fired you. No one has told you. You just don't work anymore. And you say, I think I'm out of this business. And yet you're still in it. You know, you're still struggling around, but you don't know. It is the only place where no answer is the answer. But you don't, it's up to you to decide how long you want to wait for no answer. And so they had to write me back. They had written me out of the first 7 episodes, so they had to write me back in. And it's a remarkable, you know, it is remarkable that, and Brandon Tartikoff, who was the head, here it was, at this time NBC was the network of quality programming. That's what they wanted. They had Hill Street Blues, and they wanted everything to be like Hill Street Blues. They wanted to see it elsewhere, and Hill Street Blues, not this. And Brandon Tartikoff wrote this, or he gave an interview to the New York Times where he said he wasn't proud of the A-Team, because the A-Team, when the pilot appeared, it was right after the Super Bowl, and was like the #1 show for that week. And it was this huge smash hit. Mr. T was just phenomenal. Well known, I mean, he was a huge star, I mean, from Rocket. I mean, he was just an enormous star, huge personality, and was on the set too, by the way. He was a delightful, huge, funny person to work with. But the show became this just unruly. You could just see the executives say, "This isn't what we want. Not this. We want some." And my thought about it was, well, you know, I was hired to do this. I'm an actor. If I'm hired to do Shakespeare, I do Shakespeare. If I'm hired to do Shaw, you do Shaw. If you're hired to do burlesque, you do burlesque. You do it as well as you possibly can. And you know it's all right to like almost everything if it's done well. Now, this was the task we were given. We went out, we turned this material into the #1 show, and we were told they hated it. And that, I mean, it was just amazing. You couldn't meet an executive at NBC who, I don't watch that show. I've never seen that. But are you on it? You're on that, right? We're paying you, right? You're on that. Oh, we must be paying you for some reason. Okay. What's it called again? What team? What kind of team? All right. Well, maybe we'll watch it. Yeah. Okay. But you know, it was one of the most extraordinary things. And I said, here we are. And I would sit with George Peppard, and I'd sit with Dirk and Melinda, and we would talk about this. That here we are. Well, what would happen if this was on CBS? Or on, say, here you would experience the concept of being on the #1 show, and a sort of a cult hit, and people loved it, kids loved it, and that they loved it, and then all of a sudden we started. Captain Kangaroo held a press conference blaming the A-Team for drug abuse in the country. And we started getting letters. Well, we did. But these letters from 8th graders from around the country were coming in. That the A-Team is not an example of something that we want. It's causing all children who watch the show to take amphetamines. They're not eating food. It's a bad example, and there's just tons of violence. And it just was. It was surrealistic. It truly was like the Twilight Zone. And then we went to Holland. We went to Europe. Because the show was now starting in Europe. And Tross TV bought the show, and we went over there, and the very first thing they said was, well, we really like this show because there's no violence. I mean, it's like, what is going on? How could I be in the middle of this? And it was a tremendous experience because of that. I learned to love it. I knew the first day, I knew when Brandon Tartikoff wrote, we hate this show, we don't like it, we're not proud of it. I knew that it wasn't going to last because we never had the same writer. You have to have writers that stay with the show. There was a lot of pressure on Stephen J. Cannell, who was the creator and producer of the show, to move on. NBC would deal with the fact that it was successful, but I'll tell you what, Stephen, we'll give you 4, 5, 6, 7 other shows, like quality shows, if you let this one sort of, you know. And one of the producers came to me, and you're going to pardon me, but I'm going to use the expletive that he used. And he said, look, we can give them shit and fall across the line. Wow. And that's all that they wanted to do. They wanted to die at 100 episodes, which was syndication. That was it. So basically there was this deal. And they didn't have to work on it. Every producer, every writer on our show became a producer of another show. They all were off doing other things. And so every year we had a whole new bevy of writers. And I remember the second year, after the first year, the writers all came in, and they all came in from Saturday morning cartoons. That's right. That's right. And I'll give you an example of the way it worked. It worked like this. We were doing a show. It was a biker show, where we had all these guys on motorcycles. And I was a decoy. I was to run into the street. So I ran into the street, and back then when I was a young man, I was limber, I mimed a chicken. It was a good one. Because I studied with Tony Montanaro. I was a mime. I could have worked in San Francisco for years. I could. I did, I did all that stuff. And so I mimed this chicken, and I did a few chicken sounds. That kind of stuff. And when the writers saw it, they thought that was great. And so the next show, I was a horse. And I said to them, no. Did you not see that it wasn't written into that last show that Murdoch becomes a chicken? I just did that. It's what the character does when the character is asked to perform, to do something. So you don't write that. You just write the way you're writing, and I will do that sort of stuff. No. The next show, Murdoch becomes a dog. What does Murdoch do? Of course. What does it do? He runs into a fire hydrant. And what does he do? He lifts his leg and urinates on the fire hydrant. This is the way it works. And of course, at that point in time, the actor says, "No! No! I'm going there!" so that was, that so different than working on Star Trek. Where you walked onto a lot that had this extraordinary history to it, where you would see famous actors walk on a lot, where everything was as it was supposed to be. And they were, well, and as some people, besides saying, who are you more like, when they say, which of the two characters do you love more, do you like more? And I always answer that question, even though one experience was totally different than the other, one more pleasant than the other. It's like children. You have two children, and you don't love one child more than the other. You love them differently, but you love them just as much. They're just different. And you look at them differently. You've seen them in every instant of their lives as they've grown up, different. They're both different, but you love them the same. So and I'll finish my little spiel here, so you can ask some questions. Because I can't talk. Murdoch was also based on a character somebody named that. In Beaumont, Texas. I had secured a job. I was hired for 1 year at the Alley Theater in Houston, Texas. And I lived in Baltimore, and I had a little Honda Civic. And I drove to Houston for my first job as a repertory actor for an entire year. And I drove down through Georgia, along New Orleans, along the coast. That's how I was going. But in New Orleans, there was this incredible storm. That's an enormous, just a huge rainstorm. And I'm driving along the coast, and it's very difficult to see. But then I start to see you have rain coming down, like this. But then I started to see things doing this. Frogs jumping onto the road. One who doesn't live around a lot of frogs. We don't have frog warnings in Baltimore. On the 104 today, we're dropping the frogs on the please drive carriage. I didn't think of frogs as a problem until, as I'm driving, it was all of a sudden I felt like I was on a sheet of ice. I started turning the wheel. My car did a spin off the side of the road, and I was facing the opposite direction. And that was when I saw all these corpses. So I'm late. I'm really late getting to the. So I had to get my car pulled out with a chain. My car wasn't badly damaged or anything, but it was on the side of this embankment, and the wheels wouldn't. Even though it was front-wheel drive, that was big, but it didn't get me out of that. I was fortunate enough to be within walking distance of a gas station. So I called the towing service. They got me out, and I was on my way. I had to stop to let the people who were supposed to meet me to give me my keys to the room, because they provided you with a room for the first 3 weeks. I had to call them and tell them I wasn't going to be there, I was going to be late. So I was in Beaumont, Texas, and I stopped into another gas station, and but I didn't want to buy gas because Honda Civic was pretty good, about 40 miles of gas. But I wanted to use the phone. So I pulled in, and I got out of the car, and I was looking for a phone booth. And this guy came walking out, and he came up to me and said, "You look like you're looking for something." I said, "Yes." I said, "I'm looking for a phone booth." He said, "Come on, right inside of it. You want to come in?" Yeah. So I said, "Thanks." So I went in, and the phone was on the wall. There's no booth. The phone was on the wall, and I took the phone off the wall. It was a pay phone then, So and he comes up and he just leans right against the wall, and he stares at me. So I kind of, honest to God, you say, you think that you would say, "Would you please give me a little space here?" But you don't do that. you just sort of turn around. And so I said, look, you know, I'm going to be late for the theater. I'm not going to make it tonight. Why don't you? I'll get a place outside of Houston, and I'll meet you there in the morning, and we can, you know, do whatever arrangements. And then I hung up, and I walked out, and the guy said, wait a minute, did I hear you say you're going to Houston and working at the theater? And I said, yes. He said, wait. Well, what are you going to do in the theater? I said, well, I'm hired to be an actor for an entire year. I'm going to do various characters and for an entire year. Hold on. You mean, are people going to pay to see you? And I said, well, yes. Then yeah, people are going to pay to see the shows that I'm in, but they're not going to pay to see me. But wait a minute. Are you famous? I said, no, I'm not. He said, well, if you're not famous, why would anybody want to pay to see you? And you know, that was it. I mean, it was an amazing question. I was like, you're right, you know. But sometimes people pay to see a work of an author or something, and maybe someday I will be famous. I don't know. But that was Murdoch, and I never forgot it. Ever forgot it. It was just an extraordinary. I mean, I never forgot the frogs either, and I haven't played one of those. I hope not a squash frog. But anyway, that's the end of my spiel. So are there any questions? Does anybody have a question? Yes.
I'm going to be brave. You were talking about the problems that you had at NBC with, say, the A-Team.
Right.
And it was a good hit. However, they didn't want that. Do you think it was the time period or more so just the content of the show back at that time?
No, I think, first of all, I think it was strictly, the question was the problems we had on the A-Team with NBC. Was it the time period or was it the content of the show? It was the content of the show because NBC didn't want a broad comedy. See, this was the very first program. I mean, I know this sounds strange, but this was the very first program about Vietnam vets. And it was meant, and this was Stephen Cannell's idea, this was meant to put Vietnam vets in a good light. That these were good people, that they were, and they could be funny, and that they were, this was supposed to be a good show about Vietnam vets. But they didn't want this kind of broad comedy, where these guys were shooting cabbages out of, you know, cannons. So it really wasn't about violence. It was, they wanted nitty-gritty stuff that they considered. And I would say Hollywood has a very, you know, as you all know, if you look at HBO now, we're moving into pornography. Hollywood had, there's a famous talk show host in Los Angeles, and he really hits it. Hollywood and the news media have a proctologist's view of the world. And they want to show that. That's their idea. Hey, let me show you this. That's their idea of entertainment. And it is true. I mean, I have to tell you, it is one of those, I have always had a very, very hard time in Hollywood. It's a very difficult, the view is a very dark one. And NBC, now Hill Street Blues, and you can't compare Hill Street Blues and St. Elsewhere, because St. Elsewhere in particular had some extraordinarily beautiful things. But they wanted nitty-gritty, real life, real life material. And the A-Team wasn't. It was taking the network into the area of kids shows and burlesque. It was really too attractive to kids. I mean, the demographics for the show were extraordinary. We had, I mean, everybody, grandfathers, grandmothers, parents, and kids who loved it. But it wasn't serious enough for them. So that's really the answer. Other questions? Yes?
Well, you've mentioned the different dialects and personalities that you've come across in your work. I was just wondering, what's the most influential one that's changed your life as an actor?
Well, boy, I mean, I would have to say that it was when I was a child. I would stay up late at night and watch late night talk programs with my grandmother. These are shows that most of you won't know about or remember. The Jack Paar show. He had these remarkable people, and he had British actors. I fell in love with the British dialect, and I fell in love with two actors in particular. One was Laurence Olivier and Richard Peppard, and their voices. And I finally got a pair of headphones. And when you put as you all know, when you put a pair of headphones on, if there's someone speaking, the voice comes right from here. And so Richard Burton was the first British actor that I actively attempted to replicate his sound. Welsh sound. But it was, first of all, I got rid of my Baltimore accent, which is, I don't know if you know what a Baltimore accent sounds. It's a real ignorant sound. But there's an element of British in it, you know. I mean, a Bordeaux. And I didn't know I sounded like this until I actually heard myself speak. And I went, oh my God! Oh no! I have no career in Los Angeles! I'm gonna do anything not to sound ignorant! And so, give me that British actor right now! What the? Richard Burton, right? And Richard Burton and Peter O'Toole, O'Toole particularly had such a great kind of lyrical sound. But I became an Anglophile when it came to listening to actors. And I would I'd get records from the library or tapes and sit and listen to their voices forever. And so I would say Burton and secondly O'Toole. Back then.
Could you describe what it was like to work with George Peppard?
Did everybody hear that? What's it like to work with George Peppard? George was, again, George was in How the West Was Won, which I saw, I think, 10 times. The finest sound in the history of motion pictures. Cinema sound. And I was enamored of Peppard. I mean, I love him. I saw him in all of his films. It was quite something how I didn't know anything about his reputation. He had quite a reputation for being a heavy drinker. And one of his wives said that he hit her with a cast iron frying pan, which he denied. And says that had I hit her with that frying pan, I would have done so because I wanted to. And if I had done it, I would have killed her. But I'll tell you, this is the truth. My first meeting with George Peppard in the makeup trip, when I walked into the trailer, he turned around and said, "Hello, I'm George Peppard. I'm not a very nice man." So help me God. That was very good. And I went, that was long before I was fired. I mean, you know, that was my first meeting with George. We became very good friends. George was a chess player, a very good one. In fact, on the set of on the pilot, he and the actor William Wyndham played chess all the time. George played chess with the producers too. He was always one step ahead of them in terms of what they were trying to do. He knew scripts and stories very well. So you would come in to shoot that day, and George would say, "How you doing today, pal?" And I'd say, "I'm doing fine, George." And he'd hand you a sheet of paper with all of his lines blacked out and said, "That's all that I'm going to say today." And of course, everything you have to say is in response to what he has to say. He says, "I don't know how you're going to handle that, pal, but I'm there to support you." So that was George. He was very professional in his demeanor. He was very much the movie star. He was impeccably dressed. he was just very natty guy, was aware of his history. He never drank as long as I knew him. And he did give up smoking in the final year and a half of the show. But he was a big smoker. And he finally succumbed to lung cancer. That was what killed him. But he married the nurse who took care of him. Yes. George was an interesting guy, a very interesting man, and part of old Hollywood. And George would often reminisce about old Hollywood. And he would say, "Pal, I sit here some days and think about all the money I've wasted." He says, it's mountains of money I've just thrown away. And I say, it must be nice, George. But anyway, that was George. Yes?
Curious, what was your favorite episode that in Star Trek?
Oh, my favorite episode was The Nth Degree. The second. It was the one where they actually they had lasers actually hitting me on top of the head, and my head got hot. And we would go through cuts, and they say, well, when your head gets too hot, say cut. But that was that was so much fun, because, I mean, first of all, it was the first time I got to wear Michael Westmore makeup, which I had always wanted to wear. It was only a nose, but, so I started off trying to memorize lines from Cyrano to Bergerac, and then he becomes the smartest being in the universe. And it was just fun. It was just so filled with humor and all the little touches of that show, and I just was so grateful to them. I mean, I felt like they had written it for me, which they had, and it was just a delight, and I really enjoyed it more than any of the other shows. Although there were some others that came very, very close, but that show in particular is a place in my heart.
So you mentioned they had written the character for you. Do you ever wonder how exactly that came to be, that they had written this character for you? I asked my manager to find out for me, and she basically, the answer that came back was that I physically, they wrote it based on my physicality. That there was nothing extraordinary about my features or this. No, I didn't take that as. I mean, what? There's nothing. There's nothing extraordinary about it. In fact, most people who meet me think I'm an accountant. Or if I'm talking about audio or video or something like that, they think I'm in the tech world. But that was why. And because Whoopi had said what a big fan I was of the show, and so their question was, well, where can we put it? What can we do with it? And they came up with the idea of this. They've always wanted to have a normal person on the show. And Gene Roddenberry, who was still there, who I got to meet, that was a real thrill to meet Gene Roddenberry. He gave his blessing to using me, so he knew who I was from the A-Team. And he said yes. Oh, he's a wonderful actor. Have him on. So I was very fortunate. And again, I'm very bad at auditions. So for someone to give me a part, I mean, that was the only way I ever worked in Hollywood. In my entire life, I've only worked, I think, about 8 times through the audition process. If I have to audition for it, I don't get it. That's just the truth. But I would frequently be given roles from somebody seeing me work. But there's a law of diminishing returns there. You really have to be able to go in and sell yourself in the audition process, and I have great respect for actors who can do it. And that's how careers move. You move on by being able to go in and sell yourself to those people because you really believe in this. And that's why I'm like Barclay. I walk into an audition and I'm usually stuttering. I sometimes can't think of what this is terrible. I am Barclay at an audition. Don't believe me. Yes. Time for one more question. No. The question was I ever caught up in my own celebrity? No, we were so hated. I mean, there was no celebrity. I mean, this is the truth. The A-Team ended. Now, you're in a hit television show. There are jackets. People have a jacket. They got a jacket and a hat, and you're out to dinner, and there are wrap parties. They get together, they buy things for you. People get packages, they send you flowers and fruit baskets and all. When the A-Team was over, they came and took the trailers away one by one. There was no wrap party, no one came to say goodbye. No one ever said thank you. No one ever said it was good working with you for 4 years. Never happened. There was no celebrity. It was exactly as if you had never been on the #1 show. We know you've worked for us for the last year. Keep it quiet. That was it. That truly was it. So that's it, folks.